Pete Eidbach will read to us from Allen Ginsberg's Howl. I keep running into this poem. Last night I used it as an example with a instruction class for English 211 that I did, and I had no idea that we were going to hear it again today. So let's hear some of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And in honor of our distinguished mystery guest, I am not going to bleep any words in this initial part of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, which I've read now in several times for this banned book day. Howl is one of the most important poems of the 20th century. Nonetheless, it is still largely suppressed. As recently as 2007, Pacifica Radio declined to broadcast a recorded reading of Allen Ginsberg reading his own poem because they were worried that they would be taken to court and charged with obscenity by the FCC. Howl was the subject of one of the first applications of what's known as the Supreme Court Roth standard, which essentially redefined the nature of what is or is not obscene. Howl was found not guilty. Or Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the publisher of Moen City Light Books, was found not guilty. And one of my prized possessions is an original copy of Howl that I bought when I was a young high school kid. Ginsberg wrote it in '55, and it was published in 1956. And Howl continues to demonstrate how free speech, our first and most important right as citizens of this country, is constantly in jeopardy, always being threatened, even today. And I urge you to look at and Google the term or search the term free speech on several websites, most notably Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman's website, as well as the ACLU and CCR websites, and the Bill of Rights Committee. There are constantly challenges. And I find it ironic that this poem is older than most of our faculty members. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high sat up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats floating across the tops of cities contemplating jazz, who bared their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated, who passed through universities with radiant, cool eyes, hallucinating Arkansas and Blake-like tragedy among the scholars of war, who were expelled from the academies for crazy and publishing obscene odes on the windows of their skull, who cowered in the unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their pubic beards, returning through Laredo with a belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels or drank turpentine in Paradise Alley, death or purgatoried their torsos night after night, with dreams, with drugs, with waking nightmares, alcohol and cock and endless balls, incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud and lightning in the mind, leaping toward the poles of Canada and Patterson, illuminating all the motionless world of time between. Peyote sodalities of halls, backyard green tree cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burrows of T-head joyride neon blinking traffic light, sun and moon and tree vibrations in the roaring winter dusks of Brooklyn, ash can rantings and kind king light of mind, who chain themselves to subways for the endless ride from Battery to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine until the noise of wheels and children brought them down shuddering, mouth-racked and battered, bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of Zoo, who sank all night in submarine light of Bigfords, floated out and sat through the stale beer afternoon in desolate fugazis, listening to the crack of doom on the hydrogen jukebox, who talked continuously 70 hours from park to pad to bar to Bellevue to museum to the Brooklyn Bridge, a lost battalion of platonic conversationalists jumping down the stoops, off fire escapes, off the windowsills of Empire State, out of the moon, yakety-yakking, screaming, vomiting, whispering facts and memories and anecdotes and eyeball kicks and shocks of hospitals and jails and wars, whole intellects disgorged in total recall for 7 days and nights with brilliant eyes, meet for the synagogue cast on the pavement, who vanished into nowhere, Zen, New Jersey, leaving a trail of ambiguous picture postcards of Atlantic City Hall. And of course it goes on and on. If you've never read it, it is just a staggering tour de force of a poem in a very unusual stream of consciousness kind of style that has become much more common since the days of the 1950s and the Beat generation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Readout. As you can probably tell, Howl is a cry of rage, and it's in this book, and there's other ones similar to that here. We have one more reader, if those of you who've got time, Noel Brewer. Yeah. It's going to read to us from 1984.
It's back again.
Yes.
This is 1984 by George Orwell. It's about a world where with the thought police around, you would not dare say, down with Big Brother. Sometime after their release, Winston had actually seen all three of them in the Chestnut Tree Cafe. He remembered the sort of terrified fascination with which he had watched them out of the corner of his eye. They were men far older than himself, relics of the ancient world, almost the last great figures left over from the heroic early days of the party. The glamour of the underground struggle and the Civil War still faintly clung to them. He had the feeling, though already at that time facts and dates were growing blurry, that he had known their names earlier than he had known that of Big Brother. But also they were outlaws, enemies, untouchables, doomed with absolute certainty to extinction within a year or two. The one who had once fallen into the hands of the thought police never escaped in the end. They were corpses waiting to be sent back to the grave. There was no one at any of the tables nearest to them. It was not wise to even be seen in the neighborhood of such people. They were sitting in silence before glasses of the gin flavored with cloves, which was a specialty of the cafe. Of the three, it was Rutherford whose appearance had most impressed with Winston. Rutherford had once been a famous caricaturist whose brutal cartoons had helped to inflame popular opinion before and during the Revolution. Even now, at long intervals, his cartoons were appearing in the Times. They were simply an imitation of his earlier manner, and curiously lifeless and unconvincing. Always they were a rehashing of the ancient themes: slum tenements, starving children, street battles, capitalists in top hats. Even on the barricades, the capitalists still seemed to cling to their top hats. An endless, hopeless effort to get back into the past. He was a monstrous man with a mane of greasy gray hair, his face pouched and seamed with protuberant lips. At one time, he must have been immensely strong. Now his great body was sagging, sloping, bulging, falling away in every direction. He seemed to be breaking up before one's eyes like a mountain crumbling. It was the lonely hour of 15. Winston could not now remember how he had come to be in the cafe at such a time. The place was almost empty. A tinny music was trickling from the telescreens. The three men sat in their corner almost motionless, never speaking. Uncommanded, the waiter brought fresh glasses of gin. There was a chessboard on the table beside them with a piece set out, but no game started. And then, for perhaps half a minute in all, something happened to the telescreens. The tune that they were playing changed, and the tone of the music changed too. There came into it, but it was something hard to describe. It was a peculiar, cracked, braying, jeering note. In his mind, Winston called it a yellow note. And then a voice from the telescreen was singing. Under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me. There lie they, and here lie we, under the spreading chestnut tree. The three men never stirred, but when Winston glanced again at Weatherford's ruinous face, he saw that his eyes were full of tears, and for the first time he noticed, with a kind of inward shudder, and yet not knowing at what he shuddered, that both Aronson and Rutherford had broken noses.
I'd like to thank everyone that came out today to listen to these ideas that have been challenged, because it's not the books, it's not the videos, it's the ideas that we have to defend. So I hope you will go away from this event with sort of renewed vigor to defend those ideas that are out there that are trying to be suppressed. Thank you again, everyone, for showing up. And that's